Choyo sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngonda pelge drolora zambe tse parache palden lame shabla solwade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Sikso So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseje Ningne Sowa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshu Yela Sambe Deden Male Pa Gemel Hunge Drubra Chinge Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikden Shabe Tse Dunge Namge Yenso Labchen Tsoni Yonso Tsoba Dan Chiranye Dun Chamra Chinge Lo Chancho Parge Ninsen Tugun Tu Nyu Peme Siodro Lekshu Ne Chancho Drube Gegen Kunshi Shi Tungen De La Drubra Chinge Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chomin Samjurng Embash Chodan Tumbe Dodun Malu Pa Beme Lungi Drubra Chinge Lo Dorna Tingne Tsera Tamche Dan Teche Pardo Nekav Tamche Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tukche Chingi Dala Sikso So Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dacha La Jetsun Lame Tuche Rabgongne Kudan Sungi Nawa Drame Tu Nyamsu Nyongwe Kesan Tobra Sho Kyewa Kundu Yanda Lama Dan Drame Chikipe La Longche Sadan Lamge Yente Rabzo Ne Dorje Change Kopa Nyur Toba Sho Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alua Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tudan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Aloa Makyuke Kudan Dagi Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tudan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Alo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Munye Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Munye Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Munye Swaha Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chanam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupareshu sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chanchu pardo dan kyapsu chin dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupareshu sangye chodan chanchu pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam drola pinchira sangye drupareshu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Volevo cominciare oggi
I wanted to begin today
da una domanda
from a question
apparentemente semplice.
that is apparently easy,
Però ho visto che spesso le domande più semplici
and
non
I've
sono quelle
seen
più
that
facili
often
da
the
rispondere.
easiest of questions are not the easiest to answer. And the question I ask myself, and that we all should ask ourselves, which is, why are we here today? Obviously,
Prima battuta ognuno avrà delle risposte relativamente facili.
everyone will have relatively easy answers. I'm here because I'm curious. I'm here because I feel like I'm Buddhist and I need to participate to the teachings. I'm here because I like it. I'm here because I want to deepen something. I don't know. Everyone has his own his own reasons. I'm here because I accompanied someone who wanted to be here. We can see different reasons why we're here. But if we deepen that a little bit and we ask ourselves why we do what we do, and why at the end of the day we have chosen to take this moment, to be here in this place, dedicate this time together, it's the same reason for which we do everything else we do in our lives. In the end, the reason is because none of us wants to suffer. We all want to be happy. We want to be well. And we look within our own possibilities. We look for a state of peace. We look for a way to be happy, to be at peace with ourselves. We can call it many, many different ways, but at the end of the day, what we want is simply to be well and to not suffer, which is the same thing. I mean, on one side of the coin there's happiness, and on the other side of the coin is non-suffering. They're two sides of the same coin. But what we want in the end, I mean, what we want is what makes is what we all have in common. Not just why we're here today, but everywhere, everything we do. I've never met anyone who was attracted to suffering or had aversion to happiness. I've never seen anyone like this. Maybe if any of you have, let me know. I know people who are attracted to things that bring suffering, but they see these things as a means to reach happiness. This is another subject. One can be attracted to something that's connected to pain, but why does he want it? Because he wants to be well. He doesn't want to suffer. And this is not something that this is not just what makes us as human beings. It's what we have in common, but also animals. Do any animals want to suffer? So this starts from. So let's talk about us as human beings, and in our history of thousands and thousands of years, what we've always tried to do is to survive and to reach a state of wellness, to avoid suffering. First, there's survival, and once one is sure of their survival, at that point, one constantly looks to avoid suffering and live in a state of well-being and peace and joy and satisfaction and of well-being. And this is what we, from thousands and thousands of years in different cultures, have always tried to do to the best of our abilities from generation to generation. For example, we've developed in the last decades, I don't know exactly, it's something quite new. But thinking about it well, it's new in the sense of how widespread it is, but it certainly came before. Once our survival is sure, guaranteed, we project our happiness on the fact that we have a life where we need to put as little effort as possible and where we can gain the maximum amount of comfort, what I call the law of minimum effort, maximum comfort. And if we see even the direction where we've put many of, how do you say this in Italian? These technological developments, for example, the direction of our research and the development of tools. I mean, how many tools have been developed so that we can live a life where there's as little amount of effort and a maximum amount of comfort? I mean, it's tremendous. But this makes me think, at the end, I mean, does it work or does it not work? Is it working? This is a question. How is this working for us? It's important for us to get back to the beginning, back to the origin about what we want and why at the end of the day. Why are we here? I say here, any other place. If we're following Buddhist philosophy or meditation or any other religion, any other technique, or if we're dedicating our life to sports or study or to making money or taking care of our family, or we're spending our lives and we're not exactly sure now what we'd like to do, and we're just spending time independently of what we do. At the end of the day, why do we do it? Because we don't want to suffer. We want to be happy. Do you agree? So the question at the end of the day is not what do I want? Do I want to be happy or not be happy? There is no question about that. The fundamental question is actually what's working, what's not working, because what we want is clear. And if we look behind us, we can see thousands and thousands and thousands of years of trials someone tried this way, someone else tried it in that way. This worked a little bit, that worked less. Just trial and error, trial and error. And there's a fundamental difference between what a living being, a non. There's a big difference between a living being that is sentient or a living being that is non-sentient. We are sentient living beings. So a living being that is non-sentient is a being that has its existence, its birth, the duration of what we call life and death, but doesn't have a mind and doesn't have sensations, doesn't have emotions or a judgment about reality. It has its living reality. A plant, for example, is a non-sentient living being, according to Buddhism. Also, a mountain, a stone. These are beings that are born, they have a beginning, and as that reality is alive, it interacts with everything else around it, and then there's a moment where gradually it degenerates and dies. But a living being, all living beings, work on the basis of biological rules, we can say. So if you interact in one way, it will respond in a different way. And if you react in the same way, you will always get the same answer. That's why it's much easier to interact with a plant compared to a person. Because with the plant, if every day you do the same things in the right way, you'll get the same results, won't you? I mean, the plant really corresponds, let's say, to reality. It's not that the plant says, no, I woke up on the wrong side of the pot this morning and I don't like this water. It's always the same thing. We're living beings, aren't we? There is a biological part of our existence where if you do something in a certain way, you will have a certain reaction, sure. And this is a very strong part of our bodies, much stronger than most of us realize. Often we have this image of ourselves that we have so much control over what happens to us and around us. But instead, a lot of what we live is greatly linked to the interactions that we have that in Buddhism we would call biological or automatic reactions. But beyond this, there's a part that is sentient. So a sentient being has also these biological rules and a biological body, but also has consciousness, a part where there's perception of reality and of oneself, where there's judgment, where one attributes a meaning, sees in one way or sees things in another way, and on the basis of this makes choices. And as sentient beings, we can choose many, many different ways. We have a basis of freedom of choice, of free will. But at the same time, this freedom of choice is strongly influenced by the education that we've received, by the context in which we were raised, the culture in which we live, the experiences we've lived, by everything that has formed our being up to today. But we also have this marvelous capability to stop things every once in a while, look backwards, and see where we've come. Look at the present to see what we're actually doing, and look towards the future and ask ourselves where we want to go. This ability we have. Even if I ask myself, how often have we sincerely asked ourselves deeply, but where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? Is it a question we ask ourselves often? I don't think so. Our tendency is much more about following a kind of inertia of movement than it's given to us from our education, the society in which we find ourselves. So the direction that we project our happiness, um, what we're supposed to do to be well, we follow. They lived happily ever afterwards. They lived happily ever after, because even children's stories show a world view, don't they? Years later, not too many years ago, I went back and I looked at the childhood stories, and some are absolutely tremendous. And I asked myself, what kind of worldview was being shared with me, transmitted to me when I was a child, or that we do now. So we're strongly conditioned, and we live within this kind of inertia. And if we once I was at a school in Milan. I've told this story many times, but it really marked me. It was the school Maria Pizziconi, a school in Milan, and I was invited to talk to the children. This was at least 15 years ago. And I got to the school, and I see I'm in a kind of school gymnasium where there was wooden flooring and benches around, and just hundreds of children between 5 and 7 years old, and the teachers seated around. And I asked them, I said, what am I supposed to do now? No, you should talk about Buddhism. I said, how much time do I have? An hour and a half. I said, okay, let's try. And now it's a little different now. I have less free time, but at the time I just went where I was invited without too many details. And so here I was at the school in Milan for children. I said, okay, let's talk about Buddhism. Let's talk about the Four Noble Truths. I tried to adapt the terminology to the children. And what I really, really liked about the experience is that I saw that when you talk to small children, they all answer together in chorus. So when you ask a question, they all answer. And I realized that the more afraid we are of judgment, the quieter we are. Instead, when there's more spontaneity, there's more freedom. So these children were spontaneously answering in chorus. So I was really trying not to have a monologue. I mean, that's really what's different about when you talk to a large group of people. You don't really understand what they are understanding. I remember once someone would come to me and say, "Oh, Lama, thank you for saying this. It really helped me." But in my head, I was thinking that's the opposite of what I wanted to say. And so I've asked myself sometimes, really, if I'm able to transmit what I want to say. So it was really one of my first experiences with small children, where we had this kind of ping pong in the conversation, and I was explaining what unlimited desire was. So I asked them, children, is there a toy you'd like to have? And they all answered, yes. Did it ever happen that for your birthday or for Christmas that you were able to get this toy that you wanted? Yes, they all answered together. Were you happy? Yes. Do you still have that toy? Yes. Does it make you happy like it did before? No. Do you want another toy? Yes. How long will that toy make you happy? A long time or just a short time? And here the answer was not all together. They were a little disappointed, a little bit with maybe like half of the room under their breath answered just a short time.
Quello che accade
So what happens
è
is
che noi,
we,
sin da quando siamo bambini, sappiamo
since
per
children,
esempio
we
che le
know
cose
that
materiali non
material
riescono a
things are not
sostenere
able to
uno stato
sustain
interiore di
an
benessere
inner state
quotidiano.
of well-being and
Lo
happiness.
sappiamo.
We know it.
Non è che ci vuole
You don't
la
need
laurea in
a
filosofia
degree
o
in
anni di ritratti
philosophy or
spirituali per capire
years
questo.
of spiritual
Però
retreat
che cosa succede? Da quando siamo
to
bambini,
understand that. But
vediamo
since
che un
children,
giocattolo non basta
we
tanto,
see
quindi
that a
costantemente
toy
cambiamo
is not enough, so
giocattolo.
we change the
Ma
toy
questo perché non conosciamo un
because we
altro
don't
gioco.
know another game.
E partiamo da
And we
questo,
start
cominciamo con i
there. We
giocattolini,
start
dopo
with
di un po'
little
sono i vestiti,
toys
dopo
and
di un
then
po'
clothes,
arriviamo
and
addirittura a un certo punto a voler
and then
possedere le
then
persone,
we want to possess
fino ad
people
arrivare a cose
or
materiali di
other
vari
material
livelli,
things of
immagini,
various
eccetera, e rimaniamo in questo gioco.
levels or our own
Io quando racconto
image.
questa storia
And
sempre mi ricordo
and when I
quest'altra
tell this
scena che
story,
vorrei
I always
condividere
remember
in
this
Brasile
other
con un amico che
story that
stava
I
salendo su un
connect.
suo aereo privato.
I connect with this. I was in Brazil with a friend,
Nel
and
salire su
we were
aereo, la
getting
sensazione che ho
on
avuto io è
his
quasi
personal plane,
qualcosa, un tocco di un po' di
and
vergogna in
and
qualche modo.
I had this
Mi
feeling
guarda e
of
mi
a
dice
little bit of
in inglese,
um,
the only difference between big and
as we were
small
getting on
boys
the
is the size
plane.
of
I
their
feel like
toes.
he felt a little
L'unica
bit he
differenza fra
felt
i
a little
bambini piccoli
ashamed,
e
and
quelli
so he
grandi
turned to me
è
and
la
he said the
grandezza
only
della loro
difference
tasca.
between big and small boys is the
Alla
size
fine
of their
siamo qua,
toys.
cambiamo il
So
giocattolo
here
dopo
we
l'altro,
are,
cercando di
changing toys,
star bene.
changing things, just trying to be happy.
Io credo
I
fortemente in una
strongly
cosa che per
believe
me è la regola
that
d'oro,
for me it's just the golden rule,
che è
which is
senza nessun tipo di moralismo
without
dello
any kind of
non si può.
moralism or
Fai quello che
do
vuoi nella tua
what
vita.
you want in your life,
L'importante è che funzioni.
but let it
Per funzionare cosa vuol
work.
dire?
You know,
Che
as long as
veramente
it
ti aiuti a
works, as
essere in uno
long as
stato di
it
più felicità
helps
e
you
soddisfazione.
reach a state of
Che ti
greater
faccia vivere meglio
happiness
il tuo
and
futuro.
satisfaction and helps you avoid suffering.
Sembra una regola molto permissiva,
It seems like it's very
però in realtà è
permissible, this
estremamente
rule, but
restrittiva.
it's extremely restrictive.
Perché
Because
la domanda che mi pongo
the
alla fine è che
question that
cosa
I ask at the
veramente
end
mi
of the
aiuta a
day, I
stare
mean, what
bene?
really
Che
helps
cosa
me
veramente
be
mi aiuta a
happy,
uscire
what
dalla
really
miseria?
helps me get out of my suffering.
È possibile innanzitutto.
I mean, first of all, is it possible?
E se noi vediamo,
If we
questo è qualcosa
see
che
this
gli
is
esseri umani
something,
hanno cercato in tanti
this is
modi,
something that the human beings have, have
partendo da
looked
due
for the
tipi
key
principali.
in many,
Diciamo che
many,
tutte queste
many
ricerche
different
che abbiamo
ways.
fatto,
So
queste
all
vie
of
che si
these
sono cercate e trovate in tutto
paths
questo
that have been
millenni,
trodden over the
sono
thousands
divisi
of
principalmente in due
years,
strade.
um, they're
Quella
divided
che nella
principally into
tradizione
two
del
roads.
buddismo viene
And in
chiamata
Buddhism, it's
le
called
visioni di mondo
the
mondane,
worldviews that are
materiali, e le
material,
visioni di mondo
mundane, and
spirituali.
then worldviews that are
Che cosa si
spiritual.
intende per
So
spiritualità? È
what do
una
we
parola che ognuno
mean
dà una
by
definizione diversa,
spirituality? Because we
però
all
vediamo
give
in questo
different
contesto che cosa intendiamo.
meanings to spirituality. But in this
E
context of
ricordiamoci che non è una
Buddhism,
questione
um,
se voglio
and
avvicinarmi
then
al
let's also
buddismo o no,
remember,
una questione è
it's
io che
not
cosa
about
faccio della mia vita.
do I want to get closer to
Il
Buddhism or
punto qua
not. The
non è
question is,
diventare
I mean, we're
buddista,
not talking about
il punto
becoming
è
Buddhist.
che
The point
direzione do alla
here
mia vita,
is
dove metto la mia
where do
energia,
I put energy in
cosa
my life?
faccio
What
per star
direction
bene
do
con
I
me
give
e
to
bene
my
con gli
life?
altri.
What do I do that's good
Questo è
for me
il
and
punto
good
centrale.
for others? This is the
Perciò,
central
perché io
point.
sinceramente
Because
non credo
sincerely,
che
I
l'obiettivo di
don't
Buddha fosse di
believe
creare
the
una
objective of
religione
Buddha was to create a
organizzata
religion, an
e che tutti
organized
dicessero
religion,
guarda che bello
and
quel
that
Buddha.
everyone was to say,
L'obiettivo di Buddha,
to praise
secondo me,
Buddha. The objective of
condividere un
Buddha, in my
percorso degli
opinion, was
strumenti
to
che
share
lui ha trovato,
tools
della
and a
visione di mondo,
path,
delle
um,
tecniche
techniques
di
of a
meditazione, degli strumenti
worldview,
di condotta
and tools
per
for
aiutare
correct
l'essere a uscire dalla
conduct
propria
to
sofferenza
help people
e
get
raggiungere
out
uno
of their
stato profondo
own
di pace. Questo è il
suffering and
principale
reach their
obiettivo.
state of
E qui ci
ultimate
sono due
peace.
bivi,
And so here we're at a
quindi un bivio
crossroads.
con due
There's
possibili
there's
strade.
one
Uno è quello che noi
a
chiamiamo
fork
di
in
una
the
visione
road.
di mondo
So we have a worldview
materiale,
that is
mondana,
material,
un'altra una
mundane,
visione di mondo
and another worldview
spirituale.
that is spiritual.
Purtroppo
Unfortunately,
queste due visioni
these
non
two
sono
worldviews are not
complementari.
complementary.
O c'è una
There's
o
one
c'è
or
l'altra.
there's the other.
Noi ogni tanto magari
Every once
cerchiamo
in
di
a while,
saltare da
we
una
try to
all'altra,
jump from one
ma
to
la
the
realtà è
other,
che
but
o
in
si segue
reality,
una o si segue
or you follow
l'altra fino
one
in fondo.
or you follow the other. And when we talk about following a worldview, we're talking about paradigms. It's not a question, it's not a conceptual question, it's about ideas. This is a profound way that we live our reality, how we live our reality. So let's try to, before we try to transform our worldview, let's try to understand where we are. So that first one, the material one, remember, there is the non-suffering. There are always two sides of the same coin. So to be happy, we can eliminate the situations that create suffering, and I can sustain situations that generate happiness. In other words, it's possible to obtain a state of happiness and non-suffering by transforming or changing the world around us. So the day that your health will be like this, the people will behave like this, that your economic situation will be like this and that, and that your surroundings will be like this. In other words, we have this idealized image of what the world should be like for us to be happy, and we believe that that's possible. So we believe that I will be happy when I have this, that, and the other, materially speaking, or when this person won't act in this way, or this other person won't act like that. I'll be happy when this problem will be resolved. So we believe that if the conditions of our surroundings will be the way we think they should be, then our idealized view, so when we're able to avoid everything we don't like, and we're able to get everything we do like, and we're able to not be separated from the things also that we like, then we would be happy. So let's try to think, how would your life be? How would our lives be if we really were able? Don't try to really try to imagine this. It's not a trick question. How would your life be? How would our lives be if we really could get everything we wanted? I mean, do we have a list of things we'd like to have? I've got one. We're able to avoid everything we don't like. I've got a list for that too. And never having to be separated from the beautiful things that we like. Would we be happy or not? I would be. The problem is that it's just a big trap. It's beyond utopia. It's not possible. It's not feasible. It's not real. But this is what we believe in. And actually, if we go to see, how is heaven portrayed? And this is not, this is reflected in many, many different religions. Normally, a heaven, a paradise, is where everyone has everything they want. You don't have what you don't want, and you live in that the state of wellness forever, everything you love. I'm sure that today, if you ask the younger generations to describe their idea of heaven, there would be a fast internet. Imagine how boring it would be if there were no internet in heaven, no movies. I mean, what would we do? And that's why in every culture, heaven is described a little differently. But this is still the description of that first road, that materialistic road, where we believe that it's possible to be happy and avoid suffering by transforming world around us. So whether it's in this life or in the next life, say, okay, you're not going to be able to reach that state of happiness in this life, but it will come to you in your afterlife. So the basis is the same. So My
la mia persona,
my
io sono il risultato
person,
del
I'm a
mondo che mi
result
circonda.
of this world
E affinché io
that
stia bene,
surrounds
il
me. And
mondo
for me
intorno a
to
me
be
deve essere in
happy,
un certo
the
modo.
world around me needs to be in a certain
E
way.
perciò mettiamo
And
tutto
so
il nostro
we put
sforzo,
all of our
la nostra
effort,
capacità,
our
intelligenza,
abilities, our
tutto per
intelligence,
trasformare il
everything
mondo che ci
to
circonda.
transform the world around us,
Ci
to
riconosciamo in
change the
questo?
world around us. Do we recognize
Questo
ourselves
è gran
in this?
parte di quello che noi facciamo.
This is
E c'ha degli aspetti meravigliosi questa
most of what we
visione,
do. And there are
perché
marvelous
ci ha
aspects of
portato a
this.
fare
I mean,
degli
this brought
sviluppi
us
a
to
livello
make
medico, a livello
eh,
scientifico, a
developments on
livello
a technological
economico,
level,
sociali, ha
medical level,
portato a tanti
social level. It
benefici
brought
questa
many,
visione.
many benefits, this
Ok?
worldview.
E questa è una visione.
This is one
Dall'altra parte
view.
c'è
On the
l'altra
other
visione.
side, there's the other view.
L'altra visione
The
dice,
other view says,
non importa
it
dove sarò,
doesn't matter where
non
I
importa
am.
con chi
It
sarò,
doesn't matter with
in
whom
quale
I am
situazione
or
mi
the
troverò.
situation I find myself in.
Se io non sto
If
bene con me
I'm
stesso,
not
io non
well
starò
with
bene.
myself, I won't be happy.
Quello che mi piace immaginare
What
è,
I like to imagine is,
non lo so,
I don't know.
la prima volta che ho pensato a
The
questo mi
first,
trovavo a Milano.
the
per
first
quello
time I
che ho
thought of
fatto
this, I
quello
was in
che...
Milan, so I always use
Immaginiamo
that as,
che
as
a
an
un certo
example.
punto
Imagine at a certain
trasferiamo
point,
tutta la popolazione di
we
Milano
move the whole population of
in paradiso.
Milan to heaven.
Cosa succede col paradiso?
What happens
Nulla
to
contro i
heaven?
milanesi,
Nothing against
ma
the Milanese,
potremmo
the
prendere
people from
qualunque
Milan.
città come
We can
esempio.
take any city as an example.
Che cosa succede col
What
paradiso?
happens
Rimane
to
paradiso?
heaven? Does heaven stay heaven?
Ma dove?
No. But
È un po'
no.
come parlando con i
Uh,
ragazzini, certe
Talking
volte
with
gli
the
ho chiesto,
children, sometimes I've asked
spiegando un
them,
po' questo punto, chiedo ai
explaining this
ragazzini, ma
point, I would ask
vi è mai
them,
capitato di
did it ever
vedere un adulto
happen that you
che si
saw
lamenta, che è
an
stressato per il lavoro?
an adult
Tutti
who
sì.
stresses about work,
E vi è mai
complains
capitato di
about
vedere
being
questo
stressed
adulto che
about
di
work,
solito si
and
lamenta, che è
then
stressato per il lavoro, andare
would
a
it
fare le vacanze
you
e
ever
stressarsi durante le
did
vacanze?
it happen that you
E
saw
tutti
that
sì.
same adult go on vacation
Ma
and
secondo voi
complain about
l'adulto è stressato nelle
being
vacanze
stressed,
perché le vacanze
um,
sono stressanti o
being
perché
stressed
lui o
on
lei è
vacation?
stressato?
Now, according to you, do you think
La
that that
persona che è stressata
person
o la
is
vacanza che è
stressed
stressante?
because of the
La
vacation,
persona che è
or
stressata.
is it the person himself who is stressed?
La seconda visione di mondo è
Is,
quella che dice
so that
che
second worldview says,
io sono incapace
I'm
di
unable to
percepire qualunque
perceive
cosa, di vivere
anything, to
qualunque
live any
situazione al
situation
di là del filtro di me stesso.
beyond the filter of myself.
Che ovunque io vado,
Wherever
porto
I
insieme
go, I bring
me.
myself
Qualunque
with
cosa
me.
che faccio e qualunque cosa che
Everything I
vivo, che
do, everything I
percepisco, lo
live, everything I
percepisco tramite il
perceive, I
filtro
perceive it through this filter
dei miei
of
pensieri,
my
delle mie
thoughts, of
emozioni,
my
del mio stato
emotions, my
fisico,
physical state of being,
ma dei miei condizionamenti,
and my
del mio essere.
conditionings, my being.
E finché
And as
questo
long
essere
as this
sarà
being
inquinato,
will be polluted
vedrà il mondo
and
tramite
sees the world
paura,
through fear,
gelosia,
jealousy,
invidia,
envy,
rancore,
resentment,
tristezza,
sadness,
odio,
hate,
insoddisfazione, eccetera,
dissatisfaction, etc.,
vivrà la realtà tramite
he'll
questi
live
sentimenti e la vivrà
reality
male.
through these feelings and will live badly.
Perché
Because
se noi vediamo
if
dal
we
punto di vista
see
materiale,
from a material point of
io sono
view,
convinto che la
I'm
stragrande maggioranza
convinced
di
that
noi,
the,
dico la
the
maggioranza perché non
most
conosco la
of us, I say
totalità,
most of us
ok?
because I don't
Però potrei
know
dire
all
tutti.
of you
Noi oggi
personally,
come oggi
but
dal punto di
we
vista
could say
materiale
everyone,
abbiamo una
because from
vita
a
con un
material
livello di
point of
comfort
view, we
molto
have
più
a
grande che il
level of
re di qualche
a
secolo fa.
level of comfort that surpasses kings of the
Abbiamo
past.
trovato degli strumenti
We found
meravigliosi per
marvelous
evitare la
tools
sofferenza
to
fisica.
avoid physical suffering.
È inverno, guarda qua,
It's winter. Look at us.
no? Quindi evitiamo il
So
freddo
we
d'inverno,
avoid
evitiamo
the
il caldo
cold of
d'estate,
winter, the
troviamo
heat
un
of
modo che non
summer.
possiamo mai passare
We
fame,
we found a
c'è un po' di
way
fame ci
to
siamo
never
con il
be
cibo,
hungry. There's
lì,
always food.
qualunque problema c'è dolore, ci sono
There's
medicine,
pain.
studi per
We
togliere
have
il
medicine
dolore,
to
cerchiamo
take away
tutti i
our
modi, la
pain.
sofferenza fisica,
This physical
in gran parte siamo
suffering.
riusciti ad affrontarla bene,
I mean, we've managed to
ma questo
face
non ha risolto le
physical
cose,
pain
abbiamo ancora un livello di sofferenza
very, very well, but
alto.
that hasn't
Perciò la
resolved
seconda visione dice
our suffering. So that second
la
worldview
chiave
says
non è
the
cambiare il
key
mondo,
is not about
anche
changing the
perché il
world,
mondo è
also because
relativo.
the world is relative. What determines whether what I have is a lot or a little? Is it an intrinsic characteristic of the object or the value that we attribute, often based on a comparison? In your opinion, is the first or the second? It's the second one. I receive a lot of attention or not enough attention? Am I rich or am I poor? Do I have a lot of free time or do I not have any free time? Are my vacations long or short? What you give me, is it a lot or is it a little? What determines all of that? Are these objective characteristics of these things or the way we live these experiences? That's it. It's that one. So just to summarize, just to get right to the point, there's a way to summarize it that works really well. In that first view, which is the most widespread, most common, the mundane view, we believe that happiness is based on 3 points, just like suffering is too. Remember, they always go back to back. I will be happy once I have everything I want, and I suffer because I can't get what I want. And that doesn't just mean, we're not talking just about material things. We also have an idealized vision of a view of reality, of how we want people to act, how we want things to actually be. We have an idealized view of reality. We want things to be in a certain way. So they're not the way we think they should be is the first cause of our suffering. And to be happy, things should be the way we think they should be. The second cause of suffering is we think we suffer because there are situations that we don't like and that we need to face. So in the first case, I suffer because I can't have what I want. In the second case, I suffer because I have to live through situations I don't want. Material, physical, relationships, many different ways. So the first way is the world is not the way I want it, and in the second way, the world is the way I don't want it to be, and I have to face it. If we just took a half an hour, maybe less, maybe more, to write down a list, written down list, where we ask ourselves, what are the things that I need to be happy, and what are the things I want to change to not suffer, and what are the things that shouldn't exist at all? And that third point, we think that we suffer because we have to be separated from what we like. People, for example, the beautiful situation sooner or later end. People come and go. So we think that to be happy, we need to keep them forever and never be separated from those and the things that we like. So all of this is just nonsense. It's a big trap. This is the first mundane view. The spiritual view says, is it pleasurable to have what we want? Yes or no? If we have a desire and we're able to get the object of desire, we like it, don't we? Yes. But is that able to sustain your level of happiness and well-being? The example I've given 1,000 times, if I'm very thirsty and I drink water, that gives us a sensation of pleasure, doesn't it? But if I keep drinking water, 1 glass, 2 glasses, 1 gallon, 2 gallons of water, that feeling of pleasure that I had at the beginning, is it sustained? No, it gradually diminishes until it becomes suffering, torturous. And this for any physical pleasure. The other example I like is when someone caresses us. Imagine someone that we love who comes and caresses us. We like it, don't we? But if it goes on and on with that same rhythm and intensity for a half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, and there, still there. If one, if someone wanted just to be kind, one could say, "Oh, excuse me, I need to get up. I need to go to the bathroom." You know, we look for any excuse to get out of that situation. So what happens is, it's true that when you're in front of an object of desire and we're able to get something or get something on, material, something material or a compliment, I mean, it makes us happy, sure. Another example that I always make that makes me smile, when someone says, "Oh, this person's," someone you like says this beautiful thing about you, and then that person always says, "What? I didn't understand. Can you repeat that?" Of course, the person heard, but it's a kind of massage to one's ego, that pleasure of receiving something that they like. But all of these things, there's nothing wrong with all of these. There's nothing wrong, nothing wrong with having physical pleasure, with getting an object of desire, of having a recognition of one's own image. There's nothing negative in and of itself. The real problem is that all of these things, they don't have the ability to sustain an inner state of well-being and happiness. There's nothing among all of this that tells us the more I have, the better off I am. It's not that the more compliments I have can guarantee a state of well-being. It's not that the more contact I have with material things, the greater my happiness is. I mean, let's tell the truth. When we get something, when we receive something material that we like, that makes us happy, but keeping contact with that material thing, does that guarantee one's happiness? No. No, it's all a trap for happiness. They're not negative in and of themselves, but they can't sustain our happiness. If we project our happiness, our well-being in this way, it cannot be sustained. The spiritual view says instead our happiness, our suffering are not results of the world around us, but the way we relate to ourselves and to the world. Those are two opposing ideas, two opposing views. The materialistic view says my inner state of being is a result of my surroundings, so I need to change my surroundings to be happy. The spiritual view says my inner state of being is what projects onto the world around me, and the way we live it is the result of how we relate with the world around us. And here there's a difficult point. I'll give you an example. It's not the easiest of examples. Hopefully it will help. At a certain point in our life, let's say we live a situation that's particularly difficult. At a certain point, maybe in our childhood, in our adolescence, these events that happen in early phases of life really mark us more. And so we have this deep sense of fear, abandonment, something we really, as a result of something we lived heavily. And as the years go on, we have this tendency to project that tendency of mistrust towards the world. So what we do is, when we have an inner state, when we feel something, the first thing we ask ourselves is why, and we look around for the answer. Or when we have an inner state of feeling, oh, I feel like this, it must be for this situation that I'm living, or what I've seen with myself, every time I have an inner state of being, pleasurable or not, I look for the reason outside. And I imagine that we're similar in this and that you do the same. So I have a feeling of abandonment. Who abandoned me? Why am I feeling this now? And we look around. And what's most interesting is that we have this tendency to create storylines around us that correspond to our emotions, our feelings, and our inner visions, our inner view. Is that clear? We look for justifications to what we're feeling inside by creating the storyline of what's happening around us. And somehow, if I have a strong feeling of abandonment, I'm going to look for situations subconsciously. I'm going to create situations where I am abandoned. So I mean, I have this feeling of abandonment, but that person is abandoning me, is really abandoning me. So who came first, the chicken or the egg? So am I feeling abandoned because that person abandoned me, or that person abandoned me because I feel abandoned? I mean, in this case, who came first, the chicken or the egg, is really quite obvious. But what happens is we then have situations that are concrete. It's not just an invention of our own minds. But then I had an experience some short time ago, actually about 2 years ago. It really showed me a lot. In that same week, I was in one situation that theoretically was very, very difficult. In the common view, it would have been understood, it would have been seen as a very difficult situation. And I saw it as something that I would have preferred to do without. But I was at peace with myself, and it didn't make me suffer. It wasn't something that I lived with suffering or with conflict. I was really at peace with myself. I was feeling harmonious. Just a few days after, I lived another situation that apparently was very banal, and most people would have said there's nothing to be upset about, and instead that made me suffer much more than the first. And I asked myself why, and what I observed was, when I'm in front of a situation, the image that comes to me is if that situation were a kind of sound that comes towards me, and it tries to see if there's something inside that reverberates. If there's a wound, something unresolved, something inside that's not well, that sound disturbs, then I live that situation through that reverberation, and I live it badly. If there's something very, very strong, the loudest of noises, but it doesn't resound back anything. I mean, the sound just comes back clean, it bounces off of me absolutely clean, without, there's no wound to distort the sound. And so in that situation, I clearly saw within there was a very difficult situation, but it didn't reverberate anything negative, and so I lived it in a neutral way. And another situation, even though it was very simple, kind of everyday problem, nothing special, but it reverberated something very that I had within, and I lived it badly. So I'm not saying that reality doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist independently of 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 ourselves. It's impossible to live anything independently of ourselves. And here's the question: is it possible to change oneself? Because if the way I live the world depends on me, is it possible to change myself in positive ways so that I can live this world better? Because there are certain ways of interacting with the world that actually increase our suffering, and others that increase our well-being. Those that increase our suffering are called non-virtuous behaviors, and those that increase our well-being are called behaviors that are virtuous. And along this spiritual path, there are many, many spiritual traditions, of which Buddhism is one. But this division, it starts with this division between the material and the spiritual. There's a prayer, or more than a prayer, they're words of aspiration. We say we say, may the mind become the Dharma, may the Dharma become the path, may the path be free from interferences. These aspirational prayers. This first part, may the mind become the Dharma. This means, may my direction, life direction, go from a material path to a spiritual path, which doesn't mean that I need to be seated reciting Om 10 hours a day. It doesn't mean I need to change the way I dress or change my daily habits or my culture. It's something that's much deeper. And then there are external tools that are also part of this path, and one can use them, but the objective is not to change, to make an external change, but to look at what our priorities are inside. As we've said many times in other occasions, none of us does what he does if he doesn't really want it. So what do I want? It's fundamental. It's absolutely fundamental. And in the spiritual path, at the basis of what we want, Buddha said, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. Or rather, one's fundamental starting point for the mind can go from a material, mundane mind to a spiritual mind is stopping to, is quitting to victimize ourselves, which is something that we do, let's say, quite often. Frequently. I don't know how you see it. When I look at myself, I look around me, just this last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 situations happened that I didn't really like it, but right away I saw myself. I saw right away that I was pointing the finger. Luckily, this is something I think is very, very important to continuously observe ourselves, because if we observe ourselves, then we can redirect ourselves. For example, a few days ago, I woke up in the morning. I didn't feel well. I just didn't feel well. I felt a little bit like crying. I was a little bit, it's just a little bit sad, a little bit like this. And my first tendency is to ask why. If I can make a very, very long list, you know, of course, having to do with so many situations, so many people, having so many responsibilities. I have an enormous quantity of things I could point the finger at. But in reality, I looked at myself, 2 days before, I was very, very happy. Yeah. So, and those problems were present even 2 days before. So the problems I had 2 days before, I still have them. And even the things that made me happy 2 days ago, I still have them. So asking myself, why do I not feel well this morning? My answer is, I don't know. I don't know. The causes are many. So my point is, I'm not going to point my finger on to one or another, but simply I try to put my energy into what I know is beneficial, and I try to have patience with myself. I know that this moment will pass, and as it did. So the point that I want to bring here is that this external reality exists, but the way we live it is fundamental. And this first step about transforming from this mundane view where we're the victim of the world to this spiritual view where we are the creators of our own reality and we're not a victim of the world. It's a bit like when if someone were to come to me and someone were to treat me badly, has it ever happened to you that someone treated you in a way that you didn't like? Think about that for a moment. Think about a situation. Start from a fundamental concept, a problem, for example. If there's a problem, there's a solution. If there's no solution to it, it's not a problem, it's a fact. The way other people behave towards us, is that something that we can resolve? Can we change the behavior of someone else? Can we change the way someone else thinks? Can we change the way someone else speaks? I mean, I've tried. I myself have tried. I think we've all tried at some point in our lives, and we've never managed. Sometimes we can be so stubborn. We know it can't happen. We know it can't work, but we just keep trying. So I can't change someone else. So the way someone behaves is not my problem. And I don't say that in the sense that I don't care, but it's just objective. If I were able to resolve it, then it would be my problem. But it's not possible. I can try to interact positively to help that person resolve his problem, but it's not my problem. What my problem is, the way I choose to interact with you. And I have power to change the way I interact. I'm not saying that the way that person, I'm not saying that the way that person is behaving is correct or marvelous. No, I'm saying that the way someone acts is not our problem, but the way we live that situation is our problem. And there's something fundamental in life which is about putting energy where we can have results. Because how much energy can we put into thinking that this person should not be or act like this? And the result of that is frustration without any other positive result. Instead, if that same energy is put into how I can interact, relate better with the situation, it changes the whole perspective. In the first, I'm a victim, and in the second, I am the creator of my reality, where I choose how I want to relate and interact with everyone and everything. And here, when we get into this direction, we're transforming our view from a materialistic view to a spiritual view, where the objective is no longer about what we do, but how we do it, and the directions that we take to become what we want to become. This in the spiritual path is about who we become, not what we do. In our lives, even if we look around and we look at idols and those who would be role models for us, examples to follow, successful people. Normally, do we recognize successful people for what they have done or for the people that they were? In your opinion? What they do normally, what they achieve. The other day, I was having a little bit of fun. I started making my family tree, the part of my father, on my father's side, my mother's side, and now there are about 400 people on this tree. I was able to go back 9 generations, and there are two people that are there are two important people, or two people that were more well known. One was a rabbi from Croatia who did marvelous things, and on the other side, on my mother's side, the most famous, let's say, from my ancestors, is the one who invented the airplane. And there's some who say it's a Santos Dumont, and others say that it's the Bryan brothers. It was actually the first airplane that went up and then it landed in front of all the journalists. We could say among all my ancestors, we can say, oh, wow, of all my ancestors, he's so famous. But then he killed himself a few years later. So you could see that inside he wasn't very well. He also invented those alternate steps because he had this paranoia of walking up steps and using the wrong foot. So he invented these stairs that were alternating steps. So these are the two people, let's say, who did things. But how they were inside, were they people who were in peace with themselves, with others? We don't know. Somehow it doesn't really matter the way we look out to see things. But what do we want? Do we want to do great things, or do we want to be a great person? I want to be a great person because I do. If I can manage to achieve great things, sooner or later I'm going to die. I'm going to leave that there. People will remember what I did, but I continue. Here's a story that I've told before. When Alexander the Great was in the north of India and was near the Indus River, which actually gave the name of India to India. So here he was near the Indus River, and there was a naked man meditating on a river, a sadhu. And when Alexander the Great saw this naked man, quite balanced and meditating, he was curious. So he went to him, and in his biography, he called him the gymnosoph, the wise man, and he said, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And this man who was meditated answered, I'm contemplating nothingness." And Alexander the Great started laughing. He said, "What a waste of life. A lifetime reflecting and contemplating nothingness. What a waste. And the gymnast, the meditator, looked at him and asked him, and what do you do? And Alexander the Great, he said, I'm conquering the world. And the gymnast started laughing, and he said, how useless. And I think today, is there anyone here who would like to conquer the world? Can you imagine the problems you'd have to manage? The last thing in the world I'd want is to achieve that. But here you can see two views that are completely different. One is where what I do is important, and very often we have this view that if we're not producing something, we're losing time. I don't know if you've ever had this sensation. But what's important, is it what we do or what we become? At the end of the day, what's important is what we become, what we are. Not what we do, not what we produce. It's a tool. It's not an end in and of itself, a production. So the view that Buddha brought us shows us that our objective is about who we want to become. All these images that we see here in the temple, there's all the great Buddhas and the healing Buddhas and the great mothers. These are archetypes of who we want to be. Here from my left, or no, let's start on the right. Green Amoghasiddhi means that I want to be a being who has courage, able to rejoice, that I want to have the ability to act in a way without fear, without doubt, be free from uncertainties, envy, jealousy. Ratnasambhava, and Lochana, yellow, they represent, we also want to be free from miserliness and live generously, share what we have without being afraid of being without. And it also shows our ability to not having to compare ourselves to others. So we eliminate any form of arrogance. It's our ability to be equanimous. In the center, we have Akshobhya and Mamaki. And someone might ask why Akshobhya is blue and Mamaki is white, because she represents the water element, who is white. So the great mothers, one aspect is the element they represent. So here we want to have love and compassion, stability, overcome resentment, anger, hate, sadness, develop a great state of spontaneous joy. Here in red we have Amitabha and Pandavarsini, who are red in color, representing that we want to live in a state of satisfaction and concentration, that control of our mind. Our mind is relaxed and it follows the direction that we set. So we overcome dissatisfaction and distractions, and we have a mind that's positive. And there's also white Vairochana and Akashvajra, who's blue. Here we see that we're in perfect harmony with ourselves and with others through the development of wisdom, where we live reality in a reality that corresponds to how it is. We don't see what is subjective as objective, what is impermanent as permanent. We're in harmony with ourselves and others, and it's a state of infinite inner space. These images, this shows us what we want to become. And these main images, like many of the others, we have Atisha, Lama Tsongkhapa, Buddha Shakyamuni, and Chejang Rinpoche. These are our testimonials. those who actually managed to it. And they're here to say, look, I've done it, you can do it too. And there are many, many others who managed. And particularly, there are 84 testimonials called the 84 Mahasiddhas that Lama Ganchen really loved. Here on both sides of the windows, you can see these images with many small representations. There are 84 in all. And these are men and women in ancient India who were able to reach this state of peace, living in a non-conventional way. Those who spent their lives weaving. One was a prostitute, one who worked in a bar. Each one, lived the life that they lived based on the conditions they had. They were able to get out of their suffering. Lama Ganchen always highlighted this, showed that it's not about your external conditions, but it's how you develop internally. And this is an example from ancient India that is valid today. Brings us back to that question, who do I want to become? It's fundamental for us. When we say, may the mind become the Dharma, that's where I stop victimizing myself. That's the first step. I remember that I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. That second step, may the Dharma become the path, is where I fall in love. I fall in love with an idealized image of myself. In other words, have clarity that my objective in life is not about doing, but about being. Have clarity of who I want to become. Just think. Often I see that we wish everyone a long life, a healthy life. But think about ourselves getting older. As the years go by, do we want to be impatient and nervous, or do we want to be balanced and patient? Do we want to be someone who's constantly complaining, or do we want to be satisfied? Do we want to be in conflict with others or in harmony? Because in all of this, there's a fundamental point. It's said that if we were to put all the sacred beings together and all of their power on one side, and in the middle there's the being, here we are in the middle, and on the other side we have all the power of our choices and our actions, so-called karma. Who has more power? It's the same. It's said that all the Buddhas together cannot do more than to counterbalance what we do. They can only interact positively with us, give us blessings. I'd like to just touch briefly on what blessings are this afternoon when we have the ceremony of refuge. But our actions determine what we are, what we become. So if I want to be balanced, with patience, satisfied, etc., I need to work on that today to become that. It's not that I get used to criticizing, complaining, and being dissatisfied, and then I expect one day to instantaneously become a satisfied, balanced person. It's just not possible. And there's another point. As the years go on, the more our conditionings become more rigid. It's never too late, it's never too early to do something about it. But The point is that every action, every thought conditions who we become. So when we say, may the Dharma become the path, it's about asking ourselves who we want to become. There's this phrase from the sixth Dalai Lama in Sayang Gyatso that I like very much. Remember, the sixth Dalai Lama, as I've said many times, he didn't want to follow the monastic path, much less the political responsibilities of Tibet. And it's really quite complex, his story. And he ran away because the fifth Dalai Lama was able to unify all of Tibet, became actually the king of Tibet, and unify all these small areas. So he was the first the one to be in charge of all of this, and then he died. His first minister was, what was his name? I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was a very, very important a very well-learned man. He wrote many books, and he hid the fact that the Dalai Lama had died. And so they were saying that the Dalai Lama was in retreat, and so he was actually the one. He was the one actually leading the country, actually managing everything. So the sixth Dalai Lama was recognized. He was recognized when the fifth Dalai Lama was officially still alive. But instead, it was the regent who was managing everything. So the sixth Dalai Lama said, I don't want to be part of this craziness. And so he would run away from the Potala. At the time, it was still being built, and there was a small village behind the Potala. And the doors, many of these doors were painted yellow, and these were the houses of the various girlfriends of this sixth Dalai Lama. And he wrote many famous poems, and there were two poems where he said, let me see if I remember in Tibetan. Something like this in Tibetan. I can't really remember that last verse, but it means the last line. So here's the translation with a commentary. It would be, if I desired enlightenment as much as I desire women, I would already be enlightened. And another poem, he dedicated that to a specific woman. If I desired enlightenment as much as I desire you, I would already be enlightened. And he was right, because when we fall in love with something or someone or with ourselves, even, how often do we think about that object of love? Once I asked this question to a girl who was crazy in love, and she answered, just once, but that it never ends. But do we measure our effort when we measure our effort to obtain our object of desire when we're in love? No. So this strength of passion and desire is one of the greatest things we have. And when along the path of Buddhism, when we say, may the mind become the Dharma, is one of these it's one of the first really important steps after we stop victimizing ourselves. It's this falling in love with our spiritual path, where we can dream, we say how wonderful it will be when I can one day be in harmony with myself and others, independently of the situation I find myself in, independently of who I'm with. How wonderful to be in harmony with myself and others, independently of where I am, with whom I am, what I'm doing, to be able to interact always in a peaceful, virtuous way, never get angry again. And to do this, there's something, it's an exercise that I think we can do very quickly. And it's a little bit what I would call Buddhist advertising. Let's try to do it together, because advertising is a very powerful tool. And what's the objective of advertising? For someone to buy that product or service. So to let people know about a product or a service, but have people to desire that object. And the more I desire that object or service, the less I'm going to worry about the amount of effort, the amount of money that one has to put into getting it. So advertising talks to us about the existence, the characteristics of something, so that we can desire that thing. If we use traditional terms, some from Buddhist philosophy would say this enthusiastic effort brings the result, that brings the freedom from suffering. And this enthusiastic effort comes from aspiration, which comes from faith. Faith means believing in the existence of something, and aspiration is desiring it. I'm sure that having clarity of what we want would be a great key towards getting it. So let's start, first of all, by observing our own lives. Just allow ourselves, as if we were looking at our lives a little bit from outside, a little bit like being a spectator who knows who knows that reality profoundly. And let's describe these characteristics of our life, starting with our own body. We see our body, its beautiful aspects, our ugly aspects, our age, our aspects of health, of sickness, aesthetic aspects. Let's observe our material situation. So, within the situation that we're in, the money that we have, the job we have, relationships with people, the people with whom we interact, our daily lives, what we have to do. Let's observe the human relationships that we have in our life, the social context in which we find ourselves, our surroundings. Let's try to see our life in all of its different aspects. Are we able to take a photograph of this, more or less? Now, let's try for a moment to allow ourselves to dream and to imagine how our lives would be with all of these varying aspects, but with some differences. How would this life be if we were no longer grasping at an idealized image of how we want things to be, and instead we're able to relate with harmony, accepting the reality of this present moment and directing ourselves with joy towards the future that we want? How would our life be if we didn't have resentment towards the past, aversion towards the present, and without any fear for the future? How would our life be if we were able to concentrate well, if our if our life was no longer an inner struggle, jumping from one thing to the next, but instead we were harmonious with everything. How would our life be if we could relate to that which is impermanent, that which is impermanent? How would our life be if we were able to relate with that which is impermanent as being impermanent and not permanent? If we had a state of satisfaction, peace, would it be a beautiful life? This is what Buddha proposes. Falling in love with this is what Lama Ganchen would call falling in love with inner peace. This is the second step. And the second step comes in two moments. There's the first moment where I fall in love with inner peace, which is called, which I think is a wrong translation of this term. It's called renunciation. In Tibetan, it's nejung. It's that first step to get into the path. Nejung is nebar, is certainty. Jungwa means to emerge. So it's to get out of. In other words, it's the certainty to be able to get out of suffering and reach a state of well-being and peace and happiness. Instead, when the word renunciation really means a lot else, means something else to us. If we want to use the word renunciation, we should say the renunciation of suffering and the causes of suffering. But the point is, I want to reach an inner state of balance and peace that allows me to live every situation well and interact, in a healthy way. After this, then we get to that second step, which is where we start seeing the world around us and understanding, seeing that just as I don't want to suffer and I want to be happy, I look around and I see there are many others like me. And seeing that, I allow myself to see others beyond myself and gradually see that the happiness of others is just as important as my own, and the suffering of others is just as important as my own. And along this process, we get to that second level, which is a falling in love that is even greater, where I'm not just in love with my own inner peace, but I'm in love with the inner peace of everyone, which includes my own, but where my inner peace is a tool to help others develop their own, because I can't help you be at peace with yourself when I'm not at peace with myself. I can't help you develop more patience when I get angry so often too. I can help you being satisfied when I'm not satisfied either. So this second step, which is called bodhicitta, is where I fall in love with the inner peace of all beings, and my inner peace is a tool to help others reach their own inner peace. And this is in essence is where we want to go, and this brings us to the how, because what happens, one of the things that happens that I see is, yes, it would be wonderful, but no, I've never found anyone saying, no, that's not what I'm looking for. But what happens is, very often, the solution seems to bring more suffering than the actual problem. Because let's tell the truth. Looking at ourselves in the eyes, in the mirror, facing our own negative dynamics, creating positive conditionings is tiresome. It's incredibly tiring. But so people can say, okay, I'm not. Okay, maybe, yeah, I'm not so well off, but I can, relax in my state of of malaise. It seems less, seems, it's better to have a comfortable samsara than this incredibly tiresome path towards nirvana. Unfortunately, we think like this. Not conceptually, but in the end, comes. So, in asking ourselves, can I or can I not? Is it possible? Is it impossible? The answer that's difficult to find, but you can find it, is it is possible. And here's a very important point. If I need to have faith in Buddha, not just he who guides me, but also as a testimonial of who I want to become. I need to have that same faith in myself, because if I go into a doctor because I have a sickness and the doctor tells me, yes, you have this illness that shows up in these symptoms, as you can very well see, and the treatment is possible, but you need to do this, that, and the other. Maybe one says, no, that is too difficult. I change my habits and stop eating this, eating that, this kind of exercise. I'll never be able to do all of that. When we believe in a state of healing, but we don't believe in our own ability to reach that state of healing, of health, would we ever put effort into that treatment? That prayer that we said before, may the mind become the Dharma, may the Dharma become the path, and may the path be free from interferences. An interference is something that keeps something else from coming, arising. And one of the greatest interferences along our path is our lack of faith in ourselves. Yes, all my respect to Buddhas and the great masters and marvelous bodhisattvas. They're there. I'm here. Leave me in my comfort zone. And I find my comfort in my malaise. And here I stay there. Because unfortunately, to grow, our path is not easy. Really. It's not that easy. I mean, it's not that easy to look at ourselves in the eyes, have this ability to accept ourselves with affection, to non-judgment, but also with redirecting. Say, okay, instead of feeling guilty, punishing ourselves, we say, oh, okay, well, I don't need to change. I'm already punished, or I'll punish myself again. No, it's not easy to just say, no, stop this and change direction. So first of all, we need to overcome this lack of trust in ourselves. No, I can make it. Personally, it took me about a year for me to have faith in myself, because the first time I read a phrase by Lama Tsongkhapa that had to do with this renunciation, where Lama Tsongkhapa said, it comes from the three principal aspects of the path. He says, having meditating, having familiarized Having familiarized in that way the preciousness of life, impermanence, the certainty of death, the uncertainty of the time of death, having familiarized yourself with the law of karma and interdependence, etc. It says, etc. When, by having trained in this way, there is no arising, not even for a second. And then, Nitsen Kuntu, Tarpa Tonirlo, and day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises. At that moment, the thought of renunciation, this certainty of emergence, has been generated. When I read that for the first time, I thought, forget about it. There's no arising day or night to not project my happiness onto anything mundane. How can that be possible? Maybe someone in the past was able to do it, but not me. So I'm just going to, on a side note, quickly, I find this attitude that we have. I found this in a documentary I saw about Nietzsche, the philosopher. It was in English, and he said, the person who was commenting said that the view of Nietzsche, that like modern day man would be Nietzsche's equivalent of the last man. People who have mostly they've changed their relationship with God and the afterlife, but they live in a state when they look at the stars, they say how beautiful, but they don't desire them because the parkour, the path to reach them is too tiresome. So I don't desire anything grandiose because it's too tiresome, and I'll just stay where I am. In other words, people who have a life where their objective is to survive comfortably. Again, we come back to minimum effort, maximum comfort, with low expectations. This view seems real to me in these times that we're living. And when I found myself in front of this reality, I asked myself, can I do it or not? I was quite in crisis. There I was studying Buddhist philosophy in the monastery, and dedicating my life. And I asked myself, do I believe in this? And then I asked myself, have I always found coherence and correspondence with in the teachings? Yes. Luckily, I'm someone who takes things slow, and reflecting over a year's time and talking to my masters, Lama Michel Rinpoche. I also spoke with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, my main teacher of philosophy, Geshe Thupten Rinchen, and putting together their answer was, first of all, it's a graduated process. The key is the falling in love with this state of inner peace. And the third point is, is it possible to diminish one's anger? Yes, it's tiresome. But if we put energy in the right direction, changing our habits, it is possible to diminish our anger, isn't it? Is it possible to be kinder or to develop more patience, more respect, more love, more gratitude? It's possible, isn't it? What's the limit? To diminish anger, what's the limit? Where the limit is not reacting to any situation with anger. So it's possible to diminish, it's possible to eliminate completely, it's possible to develop unconditional love. without limit. I mean, it is possible gradually to eliminate conditionings that are harmful, the so-called mental defilements, and develop qualities that help us, that are beneficial to us and to others. But we need to put energy in the right direction. It is possible to reach this state of so-called nirvana, this state that is beyond suffering. It's that dream that Buddha brought to us. He said, I was able to reach it. You too can do the same. You're where I was when I started. It's not that you're so creative and that you're unique. I mean, you listen to the complaints of one is like listening to the complaints of all, more or less. There'll be some kind of variation here and there, but it's not that we're that creative. Luckily, because this means that what works for one will work also for the others when we're talking about something that's deeper. And Buddha said, this path worked for me. I was able to reach a state of peace and balance and satisfaction through this path. Do you want to try? Try. And this path can be summarized in loving oneself, that first fundamental step, loving others, that second fundamental step, that are accompanied with relating with reality in a way that corresponds to how it actually is. If we want to reach this state of peace, if we want to follow this path, first of all, we need to stop victimizing ourselves. Secondly, we need to cultivate this feeling of passion towards this state of path. Our state of peace is fundamental for helping others reach the same. So, loving others, that's loving ourselves, which was the first step. Loving ourselves. First step. It doesn't mean simply to do the things that we like. It means recognizing with clarity what is good for me and what is harmful to me. Among all of the things that we interact with, I mean, we can divide them into different categories. There are things that in short term, in an immediate, as an immediate result, they're pleasurable, and then also mid and long term are beneficial, or maybe short term it's pleasurable, but mid long term they're harmful. There are things that are pleasurable, and mid and long term are quite neutral, and we can just put the neutral things on the side. Let's talk about the four. This is easier. So there are things that are pleasurable short term. And then there are also there are things that on a first contact is painful, but and on mid long term is also is harmful. And then maybe things that are not pleasurable, but mid and long term are actually beneficial. So the things that are pleasurable and that are good for us also mid and long term, we don't need to worry about that. And we don't need to worry about the things that are that we don't like and that mid and long term are also harmful for us, because we'll naturally avoid them. But we need to focus on the things that are pleasurable but mid and long term are actually harmful. And then the things also that upon the first contact they are not pleasurable, but mid and long term are actually good for us. So those are things I need to cultivate if it's beneficial long term. And of course, if it's not beneficial long term, it's something to avoid. So here we're changing our paradigm. That first paradigm is where what's the most important thing is what I feel and what I'm experiencing in this present moment. But for example, I remember a very practical example. I had a friend who had to have a surgery on the knee and then do physical therapy, and they tell me that it's very painful to even just bend one's knee after the surgery, and then after months and months one can actually walk normally. But why would someone accept so much pain? They do so because they know that that process is ultimately beneficial. There are situations in life that are not pleasurable. Give any example. Avoiding some kind of food, for example. I speak for myself. There's some foods that are bad for me, but that I really like. And so at some point in my life, I became lactose intolerant, and I tried to negate that for a long time. But how can I live in Italy and not eat mozzarella? It's just not possible. Instead, it's possible. And when we're in front of something that we like, but that is bad for us, it's tiresome. It's bothersome. It's hard. But if we care for ourselves, we should avoid it. Not because it's negative, but because it's just not good for me. Regardless of whether I like it or not. This is an act of love towards ourselves. What is beneficial, what is good for me, I need to cultivate. And what is harmful to me, I need to avoid. And my priority is not whether it brings me pleasure, whether I like it or not. The guiding force is whether it's good or bad for me. And if we're able to do this, it really brings many positive changes. So there are many wonderful things that bring pleasure, and if they're good for us too, wonderful. So loving ourselves can be divided into three aspects: physical, verbal, and also mental. Our physical behavior, our way of interacting with others physically, our relationship with our own body. What is good for us, we need to cultivate. What is bad for us, we need to avoid. I invite you to make a list. Physical conduct, everything that's good for me and everything that's bad. Just take one at a time. The second one, verbal. Just the way of speaking. Because our speech directs our mind, has an enormous power in our lives. Because when we create a habit in speaking in a certain way, we're conditioning our thoughts. That's why I really invite you to be careful. Be careful how you use your speech, all of us, because it has an enormous power. Even if you say something as a joke, but you repeat it, that message stays. Be careful. The third, and I've seen also with speech, from my own experience, if you have a doubt whether to say something or not, it's better to be quiet. The third one is our mind. Avoid ways of thinking, our emotions, our thoughts that are harmful, and cultivate the ones that are beneficial. But this, even just this passage of loving ourselves is tiresome, because once we've understood that certain conditionings or behaviors are difficult, it's easier to manage the physical ones and then the ones related to our speech. But But our mental ones are much harder. I can remember that bad for me to it is bad for me to react with anger or with envy. It's very difficult to actually follow up on that and not do it, but there are tools. And this passage is divided in the following way. First of all, it's 3 plus 1, we can say in this case. So you can say that the path is made of 3 plus 1. The first 3 are called the 3 difficulties. The first difficulty is developing awareness, developing this habit of seeing oneself, seeing when a feeling is coming up, when a behavior is manifesting. I recognize when anger arises, when jealousy, dissatisfaction, or any other feeling that I don't want to have, when those negative feelings come out. But the next step is people could come and say, "Oh, it was better when I didn't have this awareness, because before I used to get angry and I even thought I was right. Now I get angry and now I'm upset with myself because I got angry. I'm doing what I used to do before, but I'm upset about it." But that first step is when we're able to see, but we're not able to change. I don't know. I remember there was a specific period in my life that was very important. It lasted a few months where I had feelings and I clearly would say to myself, "I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. You know, don't ring the bell. Don't ring the bell. Don't ring the bell." But I did it. And, you know, I was aware I shouldn't do this, but I kept doing it. There's one part that would say, "Oh, you're stupid. You shouldn't ring the bell. You shouldn't ring the bell." And then there's a part that just is not able to not do it. I don't know if you've ever lived something similar. When that the step before is ringing, is playing the singing bowl and not even realizing that you're doing it. The next step is doing it with awareness. It's this development of awareness. I see what I shouldn't be doing. I recognize it. The next step, once I have that awareness, is seeing that process of desire, jealousy, envy, anger, whatever it is. I don't block that emotion, because if we try to block it, it's just going to throw us to the ground. But instead, I see a desire, for example, to play the singing bowl. I recognize it. I don't block it. I accept it. I recognize this is a conditioning. This is a conditioning. I allow that feeling to come up and to go away, to arise and to pass. I don't nourish that feeling physically on the second level, this is the second point. I don't nourish it verbally. And the third, not nourish it mentally. I don't physically play the singing bowl, even if I want to. The second, I'm not there with an inner dialogue justifying myself. I should play the singing bowl. And the third level would be to not get into any kind of mental dialogue, just letting it pass, recognizing it as a conditioning, a little bit like the story of the ring that has been told also in Islam, also in the Hebrew tradition. It's said that it's a true story. At a certain point, there was a king that was conquering many lands, and he got somewhere where there was a small village, and he was ready to destroy everything, and he'd already declared that he was going to kill all of the inhabitants. And it was the last of this ethnicity, this group, and they were asking asking for their lives to be spared. They brought the older people together, and with a little bit of sarcasm, this king says, "There's one thing. If you are able to gift me something that whenever I have a problem, or I'm upset, if you can give me something that will solve that for me, then I will spare you your lives." And he gave them until the next dawn. And at dawn the next day, they bring him a gift, something small, and it was a ring. With all the wealth I have, you think that a ring is going to help me overcome all of my problems and sufferings? And they said, "What we offer you is not the ring, but what is written." And it was written, it will pass. This too shall pass. And he was very touched by that, and he saved everyone's life. This ring, on the ring it was written, "This too shall pass." This is the reality. I don't know if ever happened to be... Has it ever happened that you were angry? I mean, I've seen people get very, very angry. But have you ever gotten angry and stayed angry forever? I mean, maybe for a day, but at a certain point it passes. So when one has that awareness, one has that desire, one has that anger, one recognizes that it's conditioning from the past, one recognizes also that this feeling that has arrived will also pass. It won't always be like that, and one can then is able to not react physically, verbally, or mentally, because the more we repeat a habit, the stronger that habit becomes. The more we're able to not follow a habit, not nourish it, the weaker that habit becomes. And we're made of habits. So the first path is awareness. The second one is not blocking and not nourishing. And the third step is to give continuity to the second. Because I'm there, I want to play that singing bowl. Okay, this will pass, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. I breathe. I don't play the singing bowl. I don't justify. At a certain point, I stop paying attention to this aspect, and then I just play. I play the singing bowl. So what happens is that third step is staying in that state where we can assure that we don't do what we didn't want to do. And this is an exercise that will help us in so many aspects of our lives. That second point, when I'm able to not nourish and not block, I need in those times that I'm not taken by that emotion, I need to create an opposing habit. A bit like if I have a selfish habit, which we all have, and on one level or another, this obsession with self-gratification, when we see that we want to act through this feeling of the I and the my. We don't block it. We know that it's going to pass. When we're taken by that, we should put energy in the opposite. And in this case would be an object of altruism, to see the suffering and the happiness of others as important as our own. One might say, well, that's fake. It's artificial. Fine. It's much better to be an artificial altruist than to be an honest, selfish person. Because this second part is about, it's artificial, but it's not fake. Because being false is showing something different than what we are. I want to show others or myself something different than what is, but being artificial instead is doing something and having some kind of attitude that requires effort. It doesn't come spontaneously, but it is sincere. For example, once I was in Milan. I was walking, I was a little bit late, and I saw someone who was asking for money. And I just walked by, and I took this habit, well, I followed this habit of being indifferent to the suffering of others, which is a form of violence, actually. Then at this point, I said, no, this isn't right. I don't want to nourish this habit. So I turned around, I went back, I went to that person, and I gave something to that person. Was it spontaneous? No. Was it artificial? Yes, but it was sincere, took effort. So I redirected myself. So we can do this in so many things, because otherwise it happens that, like, once I was giving teachings, on the 6th chapter of the Bodhisattva Charvatara, called The Lifestyle of the Bodhisattva. I was in Brazil. And the 6th chapter talks about patience. And at the end of the lesson, someone at the end said, no, I mean, I've been here for 20 years. I've understood that I shouldn't get angry. I'm tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. But when I feel angry, it just comes out. So what's the point of learning all of this? And I took advantage to remind everyone that it's not enough to know that we shouldn't get angry. I need to practice patience not when I'm angry, but when I'm not angry. That's when I need to cultivate patience. When when everything's fine, that's when I need to cultivate an antidote. Because if I try to apply the teachings and the worldview only in the times of emergency, it's not going to help. It's not going to work. So I do I take this step of not blocking, not nourishing, but when I'm fine, when I'm balanced, that's when I need to cultivate respect and love and patience. So we need to be artificially, we need to cultivate these characteristics that we want to develop. A little bit like, I've seen a T-shirt once that said, "You need to accept me for who I am." And I read that and I thought, I agree. I need to accept you for who you are, but you don't need to accept yourself for who you are. You know, it's not that, oh, I'm like this and I'm going to stay like this. No, I accept myself with kindness. I accept myself in the sense that I don't oppose. I don't oppose what I am, but I redirect. I direct myself to what I want to become. Everything we say, every interaction we have, every moment that we have is a process of transformation and training. Training in the sense that the more I do something, the easier that thing becomes. Everything that we do transforms a characteristics of our being. It nourishes one aspect or another. So if my objective is not about doing but being, and I'm in front of a situation, is it more important to resolve the situation or keep my patience? Somebody would say both. But which one is the most important, more important? I think keeping my patience, because the situation is going to go in one way or the other. It will resolve this way or that way. But if I lose my patience, that is going to affect negatively also that situation. So our priority is about who we become, and this really has to do with loving ourselves, just in a few words. And loving ourselves is also understanding that every action that we do physically, mentally, or physically, verbally, or mentally, transforms how we are. We are influenced by everything that, our surroundings and the people around us. But our thoughts, our thoughts and our choices, our speech, our actions, these are absolutely determining to what I will be in the future. This is the basis of the law of karma. Action brings results, and my actions bring results to me. I need to act in a way that is consistent with what I want. And the next step is about loving others. There's a concept that is really beautiful, in my opinion. It says, wherever there's interaction, inevitably there will be transformation, change. If I love you, I have a feeling of love towards you. Is there something happening within me as I'm feeling that, or am I absolutely static and I'm just giving something to you? No, we're interacting, so I'm transforming as well. Once I love you, let's say on your side, you do nothing towards me, you don't answer me, it's just a thought from my side, and I love you. I love you so much. I offer you everything, and you do nothing in return. Does that mean that you haven't given me anything? No, because the moment that I love you, through this possibility of loving you, I was able to come into contact and cultivate the most beautiful part of myself. I don't know if this is clear. Because come into contact with the most beautiful part of myself, which is with this ability to love, I need the other, because without the other, I'm not able to come into contact with this most beautiful part of myself. So selfishly speaking, it's much better to be altruistic, without a doubt. So when we love someone, we receive, not because someone is giving, but that mere process of loving, this is a state where we are receiving so much because we're coming into contact with this most beautiful part of ourselves. It gives us joy and balance. And a fundamental point is allowing ourselves to see others. And along the path of the so-called bodhicitta of love and altruism, a fundamental step is non-violence. Non-violence understood as a non-indifference of the suffering of others. And here, I'm just going to provoke a little bit. We need to be careful if what I want is your happiness, or if what I want is to be the one who loves you. Is this difference clear? Let me repeat it. What I want is it important for me to love you, or is it important for me to be the one who loves? Sometimes we get into this idea of a spiritual Buddhist path. I mean, the idea of loving others, being the bodhisattva, is very important. So I need to love everyone. Not because I care for others, but because I care for myself. Look how great I am. I love that person, even in the face of what he's doing. So there's a part of ourselves, if you're not careful, instead of really developing love towards others, one uses this tool as a way to nourish one's own ego. I don't know if this is clear. So we need to be careful about this. And this process requires us to see others and to not be indifferent to others, so that we can say to others that other being, your happiness is as important to me as my own, and your suffering is as important to me as my own. And in this process, our greatest interference along the path is this obsession with self-gratification. What keeps me from seeing others is this obsession with self-gratification, where I see only the I and the my. So where we say, may the path be free of interferences, a great interference is our own obsession with self-gratification. But this process is gradual, where we need to practice generosity, gratitude, respect, humbleness. Humbleness is fundamental. It's our ability to not have to compare ourselves to others, to see ourselves, which is marvelous. Because where does arrogance come from? From having to compare ourselves to others to see ourselves. So we find someone who is worse off than us in one way or another, so that we can maintain this positive self-image. And wherever there's arrogance, inevitably there'll be a sense of inferiority somewhere. And who has a great sense of inferiority, as soon as they can, will demonstrate tremendous superiority. Instead, it's important to accept ourselves with kindness without having to compare ourselves to others. So loving others, developing bodhicitta, is a fundamental point to the path. The third passage, so we love ourselves, we love others, and just in a few words, it's the correct view of reality, which means try to find a simple way to introduce this concept. When one gets angry, when someone gets angry, that object of anger, that person, the situation, whatever it is, that one's own object of anger, does it appear as something that creates suffering in an objective way, or does it appear as if we're the ones who are attributing that value as being bad and horrible and suffering? I mean, is it something horrible, or it's just us that is seeing it in that way? No, it's horrible. And when we have a strong feeling of desire towards something, oh, I really want that thing. Oh, how beautiful. Our object of desire, is it something that we want because we give that value subjectively, or just it is inherently good objectively? How do we experience that? I'm jealous because what's happening is objectively in that way, or because my perception is subjective? No, of course it's objective. Look what's happening. At the basis of all our mental defilements, anger, envy, arrogance, jealousy, there's this fact that the object on which our mental defilement is projecting onto, it's as if that object existed objectively, when instead, if we were to analyze, it doesn't exist objectively. I live it in that way because I'm reflecting in this present moment something that is coming from me. I'm giving it that meaning. If I had lived that same situation in a different point of my life, I would have given it a different meaning. Maybe things that we desired in the past, we no longer desire. A very clear example is watching the same movie at two different times in your life, and it seems like two different movies because we're different. So what happens is that the reality that we live, it appears to us as if it existed in an objective way, as if it were independent, autonomous. Reality is like this. I play the singing bowl. The sound is there. I am here. I have nothing to do with that sound. I receive it. And that's the end of the story. And instead, if we were to analyze reality that we live in, and everything that we are, everything we perceive, it exists through our perception, through the value that we ourselves attribute to it. So if the situation is an object of anger, I get angry for an objective reason or a subjective reason. I have desire for that object. Is it objective for an objective reason or subjective reason? But it appears to us as if it were objective. So our ignorance is that the subjective reality appears to us as if it were objective, and we relate to the subjective reality as if it were objective. And this is ignorance. Wisdom would be living subjective reality as being subjective. But there's an enormous resistance inside. It means that there's no more basis for desire, for anger. There's no solid basis to sustain any of this. So that third part along our path is about managing to live subjective reality subjectively, living that which is impermanent as being impermanent, and instead of living that which is impermanent as being as if it were permanent, etc. We can spend days and days and days talking about this. Just a few words, it's this. And to do this, there's some practical and simple advice. First of all, the way we talk. I suggest to never say you said this, or he or she said this, because in reality I have no idea what was actually said. What I'm aware of instead is what I understood. So I no longer say, you said this. I say, I understood this. Because in reality, when someone talks to us, what comes to our ears are just sounds to which we attribute meaning. So what was said, I have no idea. What I understood, this is what I remember of what I understood. Another piece of advice is to no longer say, this is like this, but to say, this seems like this to me. Do not say, this is like this to me, but just say, this is my perception. It seems like this to me, and I can change the way I live this experience. I mean, this already changes a lot. So, just a few words. Sem Su Chudro, may the mind become the Dharma. May I go from a paradigm where my worldview is mundane to a spiritual worldview where the objective is no longer what I do, but what I become inside. The objective is no longer to transform and change my surroundings, but instead to change the way I transform. But instead transform the way I relate with the world and with everything else. May the Dharma become the path. May I really fall in love with the inner peace of myself and with others, and may this become my main objective in my life. And may this objective be free from interferences. May I manage to not be taken by various distractions. May I have faith in myself, in my path, in loving myself, loving others, and having having a vision of reality that corresponds to what actually is. And so here are three parts to the path that we use. We can divide it into three: the view, conduct, and meditation. People who come close to Buddhism and ask me where to start. What's the first step? The second step. Okay, in the first year you do this. In the second year you need to go back to the first year. No, I mean there is of course a very structured curriculum on how to study Buddhism the way I did in the monastery, but the path goes beyond this. So we start with the view. Listening, reading, learning, gradually changing our worldview, gradually changing our paradigm. What brings happiness? What brings suffering? What are the causes of suffering? How can I have a healthy life? This is fundamental. That second part that goes in parallel has to do with working on our behavior, conduct, how I speak, how I interact physically, verbally, mentally, how I live my daily life, how I speak with people, what I think of other people. Do I criticize? Am I not critical? Do I react with anger or affection? How do I live my daily life? And here we have the practice of generosity, morality, of patience, of enthusiastic effort, concentration, wisdom. So we live every moment of our life, every day, like going to like a gym where we train. We can practice patience, we can practice gratitude, we can practice respect, love, humbleness, etc. And there's so many opportunities to practice. The third point is meditation. Meditation understood as a process of familiarization, that which doesn't come spontaneously, but we want to develop. There's formal meditation, visualizations, the recitation of mantras, and many other tools that are present to help us familiarize ourselves with qualities that don't come to us spontaneously. And let's remember that along this process, the the shadow, our shadow should be seen, but the energy should be the energy should be about bringing the light, just pointing our finger of what doesn't go well. I mean, so that dark side, or that shadow should be seen, but we need to bring the light to where there's darkness. So we accept our present with love and kindness. Because if someone comes to you and says, you shouldn't be like this, what would you say? I go to you and I say, you shouldn't be like this. What would you say to me? I would say, if I'm like this, it's because I'm like this, and if you don't like it, I'm really sorry. What I should or shouldn't be, I'm the result of everything I've lived up to today, everything that's been. If you tell me it would be better if you were different, then I would say, well, help me. I'm doing my best. I'll do my best. Let's go in that direction. But I am what I am, and as we all are. So it's fundamental to have this attitude of accepting of the present with kindness. So, but accepting means not going against what is, but at the same time to dedicate and direct ourselves towards what we want. For example, this is really quite practical in on some levels, like human relations. Think about a relationship you have with someone, for example, in your family, at work, or in your couple, with your children, with a friend, with your parents. Just think of one relationship in particular. Is it ideal, or are there aspects that you don't like? There are probably aspects that you don't like. But why is it like that? Because all the interactions that have come in the past have brought it to be like this. So in this moment, let's accept it as it is and imagine how we want that relationship to be in the future. What kind of relationship do you want to have? Once I'm able to imagine the relationship that I want to have with you, at that point, I know how to direct my actions accordingly and in relation to you. In other words, we stop reacting to what happens and start acting with consciousness, awareness to what we want to construct. As we said before, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. It's actually here where we can become our own protector. Who do I want to be? I take the reins in my own hands. I stop victimizing myself. I look towards the future. I accept with love and kindness the present, and I go forward with faith and trust and patience, looking at every small moment of the present as it comes. If someone asks me, what is Buddhism? Buddhism is the togetherness of the worldview, the rules of conduct, and actual tools, to help us direct our to develop our inner qualities, and as a consequence eliminate those inner habits that generate suffering. The beauty is that over the centuries there's so many tools that were given, and we have this possibility to follow what is best for us. If maybe there are some who are more apt to follow the philosophy and are less attuned to the mystic, so-called mystic ceremonial aspects of Buddhism, or vice versa. Everyone needs to to use what's best for them. In the past, people would ask Rinpoche, "Oh, Rinpoche, I'd like to go and visit this master," and he would say, "Fine, go and take what is beneficial for you and leave what's not." We need to integrate this in our daily lives. My objective, our objective here at the center, it's not about us all being Buddhist, really. You know, where we can all label ourselves as Buddhists. No, what's important to me is that we have more patience, more love, more gratitude, more balance, more peace, that we have a healthier direction for our lives and for the lives of others. And Buddha shared his path with everyone. And the question that I asked at the beginning, why are we here? Even those who have been following this path for many, many years, it's very important to ask yourself, renew this clarity about why you're here. Because at a certain point, maybe the objective can be to be a good Buddhist. And that's not it. We need to look inside ourselves, get out of our comfort zone, cultivate our qualities that don't come spontaneously with joy, with pleasure. And little by little, we follow this path. In all of this, when I say, may the path be free from interferences, by interferences, I don't mean the most gross, but one can be that we are left and we can just be overwhelmed and left to our the inertia of daily life, the problems to be resolved. It's good to resolve problems and enjoy our pleasures, but we shouldn't lose sight of where we're going and remembering that every interaction brings a transformation. Who do I want to be? Well, if in the meantime I need to work, I need to study, I need to take care. But how do I do all these things? That becomes essential. And here we need to also dedicate time and space for our path. Otherwise, there's this danger that it just stays, some kind of wishful thinking. Oh, how wonderful if, but now I can't. After a day, we leave here, we go back to our daily life, and then just time goes by, and then we're taken by something else. It's important to bring all of this to our daily life. And when we see a holy place like this one, and we dedicate time to the Dharma teachings, to reflection, to our spiritual path, the marvelous things, these are moments where we need to renew our energy and see our direction. But the practice comes also in the temple, but it's also at work, at home, with our friends. Our path along with our time spent at the temple, but our path is seen in our daily life. They're not two parallel separate things. Our spiritual path is not something extra that we can add to our daily life. No, it is part of integrated completely in our daily lives. Today, this afternoon, we will do a practice. It's where one takes a formal commitment. It's called the taking of refuge. It's something very personal. And for many years, I never did it publicly, only to those who asked me personally, but we saw that just for organizational reasons and for the many commitments I have, we've decided to do it once a month in this way. It's where we take the commitment formally to say, okay, I do many things, but my objective is is um, is to dedicate myself to this inner peace, and my desire to commit myself to this path. And we formalize it with ourselves most of all. For those, obviously, for those who want. Those of you who'd like to come just to listen, or if you're curious, that's absolutely fine. Also, because it's said that before taking refuge formally, one should wait about 12 years. It seems like a long time, but it really isn't. One can do it before too, that's fine. But it's something that is also renewed over time. So there's no hurry. It's something that really happens inside. So if you'd like to come and observe, you'd like to come to participate, or to renew your refuge, or to take refuge for the first time, you're also welcome. So this is what we'll do this afternoon. I like to thank everyone for being here today with your open, your heart open, and your mind with attention. And the only reason why we're here is because really we believe, I speak for myself, I really strongly believe in everyone's ability to put into practice this path, to put this path into practice, because otherwise there would be no reason for this place to exist. If we asked ourselves, why are these teachings given? Does this place exist? This development of love for ourselves, love for others, a correct view of reality, this path of growth, it's something I believe strongly in. I mean, I love moments like this. It's not at all difficult or tiresome for me. But there are so many other beautiful things to do in life too. And I realize, for example, I don't have any patience for teaching. I realized this when I tried to teach the Tibetan language, because once I've explained the alphabet to you, it's written and we've recorded it. What more do you want me to do? Why do I have to repeat it? Instead, what we're doing here is not teaching. Most of what we said today, we already know. It's a path of reflection and analytic meditation. We're walking together towards a very, very deep inner path that I strongly, strongly believe in. I've seen this, and my masters always had faith in me, and that's why I have faith in myself. Lama Michel Rinpoche also had a tremendous amount of faith in us, wanted us to put all the teachings into practice, and where we take the reins in our own hands. If we already are holding the reins, then we hold them tight and we keep going. So if you've heard of anything that you think could be of benefit, try to put it into practice, try to remember it even later today, put it into practice. Now it's time for dedications in our Buddhist tradition. There's something to do at the beginning. We generate our motivation and we remember why, and at the end we dedicate what we've generated. So we dedicate the positive energy and the virtuous actions that we have created here together, that we have done, we've created in the past, and that we will create in the future. And may we all really put into practice what has been transmitted and reach a state of great inner peace and help others do the same. And maybe we dedicate, wherever there's suffering, may there be peace. And wherever there's illness, may people recover and have and be free from illness. and may there be peace within inner peace and within the family and in society, and may also that all the beings who guide and help along this path, may they have favorable conditions to guide us along the path.
Losan tempe drume sasumge druwe munsela taktu ne gyurchi kewa kundu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longcheching sadan lamge yunte rabzo ne dorje change koba nyurtuba sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chingelo kuncho sumke ngodrubutsol kuncho sumke trashisho All'alba o al tramonto
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Repeat after me.
Sem cho sudro Che lam tudro Lam la parche
May the mind become the Dharma.
Possa il Dharma diventare il sentiero.
May the Dharma become the path.
Possa il sentiero essere libero
May
da interferenze.
the path be free from interferences.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good lunch,
Poi riprendiamo
and we will
alle 3:30.
come back at 3:30.